Hey everyone, how you doing today? Awesome. Well, my name's Anne Marie. I'll be here for the next 2 days with you guys. We're going to go ahead and kick it off this morning. We've got Brian Kramer. He is Executive Vice President and GM of Cars.com and Accu-Trade. We're going to be talking about how to future-proof your used vehicle acquisition strategy. Take it away, Brian.
Thank you. So I'm going to start off with a little story. I've told this at a conference before, but my grandmother's 96 years old, and I was talking to her about a year ago, and she was talking about World War II. She was talking about how on the Maginot Line, right before Hitler invaded France, they formed a line that was about 20 miles long of tanks in the upper northeast corner of France, right next to the Ardennes forest. And everybody kept on saying, it's not a big deal, don't worry about it. As Neville Chamberlain is telling all of Great Britain, you have nothing to worry about, everything's just fine. Well, why are they lining up all of these tanks? I don't know, but we've got a Maginot Line, which is a big ditch that was dug out around the bottom of France. So all of a sudden, they do a blitzkrieg, and they invade them, and all these barbarians at the gate, they were not prepared for. So I use that analogy to segue into the same disruption that's coming from Elon Musk, Daniel, he's a big Tesla fan, and how EVs are disrupting the auto industry, not just from a resale value standpoint, but I would challenge that you're not necessarily competing with EVs, you're competing with his process because it's frictionless in order to buy a vehicle on a Tesla website. They're selling easy, online, instant. They're leveraging data that, right now, the top 3 vehicles in America are the Ford F-150, the Chevy Silverado, the Ram 1500, and you know what the fourth one is? Model Y. And then the RAV4, then the Camry. So slowly but surely, because it's not in a lot of competitive market share sets, the Model Y has just bubbled up, like Michael just said, and nobody's realizing it's like a frog in a pot of boiling water. It's just going ever so slowly. And now they have all that data that they're using to sell other products, such as insurance. So they're selling automotive insurance, and they're finding other verticals to compete in that they're not just looking at service contracts and all the legacy businesses. They want to sell in-home Tesla battery charging stations, solar panels on people's houses, and they're using all of your customers' data to do it. But that's not the only disruption that's happening. And this is obviously, common knowledge for everybody in this room, but CarMax is selling easy online and instant. You've got Carvana saying they're taking used inventory share, focusing on the experience. We'll come to you, write you a check on the spot, and they actually do it. And then you've got companies like Vroom that are attacking dealer reputations, and they're using the fact that many dealers won't do these two things, and they're using it as leverage or like a pivot point to say why for a differentiation when anybody in this room can do the exact same thing. So here's the data around CarMax and what they're doing. I'll just use them as an example because they're the King Kong in the room. So the total number of consumer vehicles acquired via their showroom acquisition process from 2003 to 2021 was, really 2023, 700,000. And that's the saturation point. That's the most cars they can source via their traditional legacy process. Last year, they acquired 1.2 million total units. The year before that was 1.412 million units. Last year, the number of vehicles that they wholesaled at a 95% sell-through rate was 706,000. So what does that mean? That means that of all these vehicles they're acquiring from consumers, which is 1.2 million, that they're wholesaling 706,000. That includes their trade-ins that could be on those vehicles. But that's how many cars that they're wholesaling. So they buy them all, and then who do they sell them back to? That's right. So what I'm advocating is, and we're going to talk about today with JR Toothman and Dave Saenz, is how to acquire more of these vehicles from consumers. And come on up, Dave. And what are some best practices in order to make sure that we're not just having Carvana buy them and then sell them back to us?
Good morning. Good morning. Again, as Brian said, my name is David Saenz, and a few familiar faces out there, but for those that I haven't met before, you might be saying, who's David Saenz and why is he on the stage? Number one, this is my 40th year working at car dealerships. Worked 10 years with Toyota, 21 years with Mercedes-Benz, and the last 8 years with Cadillac. I share that, and from everything from giant Toyota stores to top 55 Mercedes-Benz and now with Cadillac. And the reason I share that with you is not to impress you, but to impress upon you that, number one, of having worked in different volume stores, it's really given me some different perspective. And sometimes when you come to these meetings, a lot of times the person on the stage, number one, is talking about, we sell 600 cars a month, and 200 used or 300 used in some big store. And quite candidly, I've been in those presentations before, and sometimes it's a little hard to relate. And so when people are obviously from mixed sizes and dealers and different big metros and sometimes rural markets, and you're listening to somebody and you're looking up there and you're saying, hey, maybe that's not me. And so number one, I wanted to kind of tell you about our store as we go forward and some of the things that have helped us and some of the concepts that I believe will work regardless of the size of the store. And you can tell by, I've been doing this for a while, I've actually got note cards here as opposed to maybe some electronic device. And so once, part of it is a lot of times when someone's on the stage and talking about selling 600 cars or whatever the number is, a lot of times you think that, hey, maybe we can't compete with them because of whatever, economies of scale. And I've worked both on the private cap and on the public side, so kind of have a good perspective from both sides of it. And the one thing that I think has really changed, particularly with the availability of technology, is that even if you're working for one of the giant publics, even as a mom and pop, okay, and I kind of like to consider our business a mom and pop. We have 2 Cadillac franchises and 1 Subaru store. But even as a mom and pop, which I like to say, the big stores really don't have a competitive advantage because of the availability of technology. And so maybe they've got some benefit from economies of scale, and maybe they got deeper marketing budgets. But from a standpoint, number one, of being able to have access to tools, you're still going to have access to all the technology that can help you succeed. And I think a lot of people get lost in that. That number one, they don't think they can compete against a big player because of, for whatever reason that they might have, or self-limiting beliefs. I like to consider myself, even after 40 years in the car business, a student of the business. Coming to these type of conferences, number one, and you can see, look, these numbers up here are annualized numbers. We're not selling 600 cars a month, okay? You can see, and I wanted to put this up here really from a standpoint, Brian collectively put David and Goliath, okay? Because in many cases, we're competing against big players. And as I said, the technology kind of levels the playing field to be able to do that. And being a student of the business, let me ask, look, I would tend to believe that everybody here is a student of business as well, and obviously came to collaborate and hopefully some learn. Let me ask a question. Is there anybody here that paid their own way to come here? And I'm not talking about the people that are dealer principals or anything else. Anybody else pay their way? And so, when I think about that, kudos to you, because a lot of times, look, it's easy to spend, number one, your employer's money to be able to educate yourself. It really speaks volumes when, number one, you reach in your own pocket to be able to say, I'm going to educate myself. And in the history of mankind, I don't think it's ever been easier to self-educate. If you go on Google or YouTube right now, you can pretty much figure out how to do brain surgery if you Google for about 10 minutes. And so that's kind of the beauty, really, of the environment that we're living in right now. And so, one of the things that even after 40 years in the business, I tell myself all the time, and I certainly speak to my crew about saying that we need to keep ourselves and label ourselves as advanced beginners. Okay, and what do I mean by that? Is that number one is that because after being in the business for 40 years, it's really easy to say, hey, I've done that, I've seen that, that won't work. And the reality is that, look, the business is changing so rapidly, we've got to be able to, number one, adapt with new technology solutions and new methods to be able to do business that continue to succeed. And so being that advanced beginner mentality, I think, keeps an open-minded, and I would tend to believe that the majority of you here then hopefully all of you could keep that same advanced beginner mentality so that you are open-minded and come away from something today that maybe just one item that you might be able to take back to the store and apply to be able to help yourself succeed. And most of the ideas that I'm going to share today, none of them are revolutionary. And most of them, number one, I didn't create myself. I've learned from others. And it's always interesting because after you learn from others and you do it for a while, somehow it kind of seems to be your own idea. Have you ever thought about that? You know, everybody becomes a genius after they've listened to all the geniuses, okay? And now all of a sudden, they're the genius. But one, you know, today, number one, I wanted to talk a little bit of humility, okay? Because I think, you know, the takeaway for me at these type of things isn't, number one, to say, hey, we're going to go sell 600 cars. It's going to look for relative improvement in your own operation. And so, number one, if you can come away and you can sell 5 more cars or 10 more cars or whatever the metric is that you're looking to do, God bless. And so, one, you know, look, I want to frame this properly. And, you know, we have a very small buy center, and we buy between 20 and 30 cars a month. Okay, and you know that you might be saying some of the operators in here are selling, you know, are buying hundreds a month. But I will tell you this, you know, if you think about what your front end growth or total all package is, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, you pick the number. If you're just buying 30 cars a month, and whatever your gross is, let's call it 4,000, you're still on an annualized basis adding about another $1 million of gross at 30 cars. And so many times the reason that people don't take the first step to be able to doing something different is they don't necessarily think it's going to yield the results, or they're not necessarily committed to the process. And that's usually one of them, and they might not have the support from senior management to be able to continue to execute. But I go back to that, 20 or let's call it 25 cars. You're still talking about $1 million. And so when we look at it from a small scale of how much it can incrementally do to your business, I don't think a lot of people think of it in that stage. They say 20 cars, what's the big deal? Well, the math adds up pretty quick. Number one, I think the biggest overlooked opportunity when it comes to with either private party, okay, or service lane acquisition, or street purchases, whatever you want to call them. And this is a big one that I learned this actually from doing a field trip to another store. And the biggest thing that I think is overlooked in that is, number one, of having a culture of acquisition in the store. And what do I mean by that? If we go into the accounting office at your store, do those people know you buy cars? I'm not talking to a person who cuts the checks, okay? But I'm talking about the clerks. I'm talking about, do the lot people understand that you buy cars? If they go into the service drive and a customer says, can I get an appraisal? Are they going to say, you need to go up front to be able to get that done? Because there's a big disconnect, number one, of that culture of acquisition. And so when we can get it to that every single person in the building understands that you buy cars, number one, the ball starts rolling. Because if you think, number one, if we're going to rely on your sales staff, some have monster sales staff in here, some might have really small ones. But if we can take that exponentially and be able to make certain that every single person in the dealership truly understands that we are in the buying car business, all of a sudden the ball starts rolling, and then deals just kind of start to fall in your lap a little bit, and then the acquisition efforts become significantly less. One thing that does come up, particularly for service lane acquisition, is service advisor conflict. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Is that, number one, if you have service advisors, number one, and they might have a big significant repair, they might not necessarily want to get that car appraised because they're going to think that, number one, they're going to lose any commission on that big ticket item, whether it's an engine, transmission, or just a bunch of work that needs to be done. And many of you have an internal advisor, okay, for used car reconditioning. And so in many cases, if that car gets purchased, okay, or traded for that matter, that repair order would then leave them, go to the internal advisor, and they would lose any commission on that transaction, which then brings that internal conflict of, do I really want to do this? Because number one, I'm going to take money out of my pocket. And back to that acquisition throughout the whole crew, do we incentivize every single person in the dealership, number one, if they're referring people and we transact? So that, number one, and you got to pay, okay? If you do that and you do it timely, I always call it the Shamu effect. Anybody know what I mean by the Shamu effect? The Shamu effect is you can't ask the Willie to jump through the hoop, okay, down at SeaWorld and not give him the fish right away. Okay, if he jumps through the hoop, okay, you tell him you're going to give him a fish next week, chances are Willie's not jumping through the hoop again. Okay, and so number one, the Shamu effect, number one, making sure that we pay and pay timely when we do get results certainly has helped us. Number two, having a decentralized appraisal process, and this is one that I think a lot of dealers struggle with. And being able to have, number one, as many people that can put a number on a car that you can transact at and feel comfortable with. And this is one, look, most used car managers are control freaks, God bless them. Okay, they want to make sure they've got their fingerprints on the car, and they believe that nobody else other than them in the entire world can put an accurate number on the car. Anybody experience that? A couple, okay. Anybody that didn't raise their hand is not telling the truth. Okay, we all know that. Okay, and so how fast and accurate is really the key. Because if you've got somebody in the service drive, number one, we're already trying to do the dance with the customer between the service advisor, not tick them off. They're trying to get to work, and we're still trying to be able to get to them and be able to appraise the car and get them a buy number as fast as possible so that hopefully we can move towards a transaction. And so it does take a little bit in the dance there. Also, how fast can you get a check? Okay, look, if you're going to go and look, you could argue this if you went to one of these, big merchandisers. I won't, CarMax, one others. A lot of those places, depending on what day of the week and how many million people are in line, you could get a check right away, including if there's a payoff. And in many places, number one, the controller or just the business practices are such that you're not going to be able to get a check without a title. And so that is going to limit you from being able to transact on more cars. And so that's an internal one that everybody has to do whatever they feel comfortable with. But I will tell you, if you can't get a check right away on an equity check, you will definitely miss deals. And then strategy. It's interesting to me because, look, I got lots of friends in the car business and made a few more over the last couple hours. But I will tell you, it's always interesting to me when if I bring up buy center or I talk about buying private party, it's amazing to me how many people are not involved in private party acquisition. Candidly, I'm amazed. Look, as a General Motors dealer, with the UAW strike right now, and who knows how long that's going to go on. I would tell you that number one, and look, I expect to be out of new cars here by the end of the month. So for me, private party isn't something, number one, that is a want to, it's a have to. And when you have to do something, it's amazing how creative you can get to be able to make something happen. And as car dealers, probably one of the most resilient group of people in the whole world, it's amazing to me to always see some of the innovative ways that people do that. And where I'm going with that is that if I talk to some of my colleagues and they say, yeah, we buy cars, I say, what's your strategy? And then I'll usually get a great pause. And they'll say, Dave, I got a website, I got a banner on the website, and we have a sign in the service lane, and I say, what else? And that's usually where it ends. And so one, it goes back to oversimplification, but look, a guy like me hasn't had as much success in the car business with this stuff being complicated. There's complex pieces to the business, but it's not overly complicated, and most of the solutions are relatively simple, but a lot of times people try to make it more complicated than it is. And so just getting to some of the basics there of that strategy. I'm not here to tell you what the strategy should be because it's all going to be different for your store and your market. You might be also in a market where, number one, there's lots of people playing in the private party. I'm in the Washington, D.C. metro. We're in Chantilly, Virginia. There's lots of people playing in private party. So when you're going out there chasing stuff, you're coming against the same players all the time. When you're calling somebody, you're chasing them on Marketplace or whatever, pick your poison, that you're coming up, yeah, I just got a call from this person. So you know kind of who you're competing with all the time. And so as we go over here, look, so, back to the last was really kind of the success killer. And I'm going to talk about this here for 1 second. And so one, this example up here was, this happened to actually be a friend of mine, okay, that was coming in to buy a couple of Escalades. And I happened to not be there that day. And so he was trading in his 22 Escalade, okay, and our guys gave him the number and his head exploded and he left the showroom, okay, because he thought that the car was worth $90,000 and he told me, he said, Dave, I'm going straight to CarMax. I said, well, number one, like most of you, probably have CarMax offer in your store, okay, so you're going to be able to tell, number one, what the CarMax offer is already to begin with, save him a trip. I showed it to him on the phone. He still didn't believe me. Okay, and I got on the phone and talked him off the edge and got him back in and we made a deal. But I wanted to show this example. And I'm talking about the success killer, okay, the success killer, and I'm going to lead to that in 1 second. But here you can see the of an unknown technology, Accu-Trade. Okay, here, and I'm not here for a commercial for Accu-Trade. We do use it. And I wanted to show this because this was on September 20th. Okay, so about a week ago. And these are undoctored documents. Okay, and you can see that number one, our number that we came up was 82.9, and you can see for those in the back that can't see it, the CarMax offer number was $78,500. And you could use examples. Some are going to be higher or lower. But whatever your scenario is on this, and I go back to the success killer. Number one, the number one success killer is trying to steal trades. Okay, or not providing a proper value on the car. Because if we do that, have you ever seen the sales managers behind the tower when they stole a trade and they're high-fiving each other? Anybody ever seen that? No, huh? I see a lot of heads going like this. Well, what do you think that does to the salesperson to be able to go back with conviction the next time, believing that we're giving fair value for the trades? Because if we're in a scenario that there's just too much transparency in the market, that we possibly think that we would be able to give somebody not a fair value for their car. And in our case, with number one, we're a big Escalade dealer, and anybody that's in anybody that's in a Chevy dealer looking for big full-size trucks, most of those have been special order, and a lot of them have been for months. So when you're looking at trades, for us, part of the catalyst for getting into private party acquisition and really starting to push the service lane was that number one, our overall trade percentage stunk. Okay, because people had so long to be able to shop the car and be able to figure out what they were going to do. And I'm not talking about look to book. I'm talking about overall trade percentage. If you sold 100 cars and you traded 30, you were at 30%. Not a look to book number, different calculation. And so really having to try to be more successful in our trade percentage, I really didn't have that much success, quite honestly, because we had such a long timetable for the special orders. And people were figuring out, number one, either I'm going to give the car to my son, or I'm going to sell it to my relative, or buy my car off lease sometime and just keep it. So there was a variety of things that were really holding us up. And so one, if we're in a scenario where the salespeople do not believe that we're being transparent with the customers and providing fair value, and I said fair value, not the highest value. Okay, we do not have to be the highest value to transact, and a lot of people get hung up on that. But I will tell you that if the salespeople do not believe that we have the highest value, number one, they'll be CarMax's best buyer's representative. In closing, number one, I just wanted to say I appreciate everybody giving me 5 minutes of your time or 15 minutes of your time. And anything I said today wasn't revolutionary, but hopefully you took one nugget away that might help you. And again, my name is David Saenz. I look forward to meeting all of you here at the after party. We'll see you. Yeah, I did. Actually, two of them. It was him and his brother.
Hi, my name is JR Toothman from Toothman Ford in Grafton, West Virginia. It's a town of about 4,500 people, so probably half the town would be here today. Per capita income in our county is about $27,000 a year, and we sell about 200 used vehicles a month. So I actually grew up in the Ford business, but had no intention of getting into it, but came back after college when my dad was struggling mightily, and I thought I would try to help for a couple years, and now a couple years has turned into 30 years. But kind of the key to our success throughout the process has been, as Dave alluded to, transparency. Transparency from the pricing aspect with what technology is available to us, but also transparency within the acquisition process. And I think as we go forward, if you're not full-blown into having an acquisition department, then you're missing a ton of growth and a ton of opportunities. We've found through actively buying off the street from consumers, we consider that a customer just the same as we're selling a vehicle or getting a service repair order. So those customers are sometimes the most enthusiastic of our testimonials because they're just as excited to sell that vehicle, possibly put some cash in their pocket, And oftentimes they send referrals just the same as a sales customer. So the fact of the transparency of that entire process, giving them a value, and like once, as Dave alluded to, not giving a plug for Accu-Trade, but now with the transparency to be able to give an immediate value and one that you feel good about that is actually hammered down based on different data, even from the color, the engine, the interior, that type of thing, gives you a confidence to know that you're giving them a fair value that you can feel good about and that they can shop. The other thing is, and this is one thing that has been paramount to our growth through the years, is what my friend John Ellis refers to as a calculated courage. And the fact that, for instance, you have to define your acquisition channels, because we all know what our sales goal was going to be, how we need to get there, that type of thing. But obviously I consider the acquisition channel from off the street or the street purchases kind of the all-you-can-eat buffet, because we're going to take every bit of that we can. And that we can supplement that with wholesale purchases from the auction, any other type of environment. But through that, you still need to have a calculated buying strategy throughout the week, throughout the month. And if you break that down on a weekly basis, and like I said, John Ellis with Automotive Advisors has done that for us in a way that has given us a game plan day by day, week by week, month by month, as opposed to like right now in the market with the UAW strike going on, a lot of people are saying, oh, damn, I got to go out and buy 40 vehicles this week. Well, now you're exposing yourself to the market at this particular day and time, as opposed to, spreading your risk across a longer period of time. The other thing that I can say is, and as Dave said as well, the entire culture in your dealership should be about acquisition. We should be just as excited and sound the alarm off, that type of thing, when we buy a car as we do when we sell a car. Because we all know, and if we're studying your source of gross per vehicle sold, your acquisitions, your private acquisitions are always undoubtedly going to be among the highest. And so that profit is actually made when the vehicle is purchased, not when it's sold, because we know that we purchased the right vehicle at the right money at the right time, that there's going to be profit. It might be 15 days from now, it might be 30 days from now, but that profit is going to be inevitable. So like I said, we have to look at that as a constant source of income. Like you said, on a scale of he was talking about $1 million. We buy about 50 to 70 a month. And we probably project that as around $2 to $2.5 million of extra gross revenue. And like I said, it doesn't require a huge investment from anybody's standpoint. The manpower, you can grow that as you go forward, but the technology you have to stay on top of, and there's a lot of technologies available like that. Like I said, with Accu-Trade, VinQ, there's different sources of being able to find these people, give them accurate values, and give them the transparency that they're all looking for. And I'm not as long-winded as Dave, so I'll let you guys go. Thank you.
So I'm just going to bring it back around on a couple of hot topics right now. EV appraisal values. Who thinks they have that nailed? John Ellis. So here's a 2022 Ford Lightning. This is on July 19th, 2023. I know you probably can't see it in the back, so I'll point it out. So the average depreciation was $108 a day or $3,200 a month. On this date, it was 152 market day supply with 130 average days on market. So I started getting all these calls that morning because that's the day that Ford dropped the price $10,000. So on that day, when it happened, everybody was telling me, MMR is 60,000, you're 15 grand light, and you're hitting all these cars in the wrong way. But if you fast forward to 9/22, it's kind of still the same situation. Now, if you put that into most valuation tools, it's going to come back, we're unable to put a value on that vehicle. But here's how you can predict the future on any EV. It all comes down, and this bubble's not going to pop anytime soon. This is just a couple days ago. But it's still 149 market day supply and 146 days on market. The only thing that's happened is the depreciation has gone up to $3,500 a month. But just as we predicted on July 19th, the same is still holding true. And based on this math, they're either going to lower the price again, because this is what we see on Model Ys, this is what we see on Model X's, Tesla Model S's. When it starts hovering in this range, there's really no way to know what that vehicle's worth. We'll still guarantee it, but a lot of people are going to say, well, MMR is still 56.9. The one thing I would say is that MMR is not going to write a check. JD Power is not going to write a check. KBB will on ICO, but they won't write a check from their valuation tool. So if you take a look at the two, what we predicted was going to happen from a depreciation standpoint is exactly what happened. Now, while you can say that MMR is 56.9 or $60,000, as you take a look here, there's a slew of vehicles that are retailed now are listed for 58.9. So the one thing I'll say about MMR only changes when what? Right, when they sell cars. So if there's been no sales and there's a 70 or 75% or higher no sale rate, then that won't be realized until somebody decides that they're going to bite the bullet and actually happen and actually let that thing run through. And it's typically a public retailer because they're just trying to get off the books for the quarter that starts dislodging that avalanche of value. But that market day supply and the days on market is still swelling. So that's going to lead into my best end user. Now you could give them a range, but then we'd both be wrong. So here's the four quadrants that we look at as who is the best end user for these vehicles. So here's a high demand, low risk, quadrant one. Low miles for that specific vehicle, low market day supply, low average days on market, clean Carfax, high sell-through rate at the auctions. That's easy, right? Everybody's the best end user for this car. It's just a clean vehicle, and those are the ones you're going to get off the service drive from buying from consumers. But then you've got a high demand, high risk vehicle. So that could be like a Model S, Model Y. Most EVs, some EQSs right now. So people want them, but it's also very risky because if the supply goes up, all of a sudden you could, like one of the dealer groups that we deal with on Teslas, lose $1 million in one quarter in wholesale loss. And all it takes is just a couple moves from Elon Musk changing the values on these vehicles for that to happen. So what's a high demand, high risk vehicle? EVs, high miles for that specific vehicle, less than ideal color. A Mercedes-Benz GLA front wheel drive up north without a moonroof. That's a perfect example of one. It's just an outlier, and the market day supply on those is over 100 days, whereas GLAs as a whole are in the 20s. So it's deceiving because it looks like it's a 37 market day supply, but when you get rid of the moonroof, it becomes a very high risk vehicle. Low no sale percentage, high volatility in values, high average monthly depreciation. Then you've got low demand, low risk. This is like the bulk of everybody's inventory. So many dealers might be the best end user for this vehicle. It's core inventory with low margin, like a CPO vehicle, where vAuto is going to rank it as a bronze car. But that's the commodity vehicles, and a lot of times what I see is dealers pricing these at 102% when it's not 102% price to market vehicle. And then you've got low demand, high risk. Identify immediately if you're the best end user, and if you're not, direct to wholesale. High probability of more recon needed than was estimated, bad Carfax, bad VHR, one strike, poor pedigree, or a combination of bad color, high miles for that vehicle, high market day supply, high average days on market. These are the ones that I see, and I'm sure many of you see, either in your stores or with your clients, that people try to retail out of when they're not the best end user. And instead of just saying, hey, I'm not the best end user, and I'm okay wholesaling an EV, or I'm okay wholesaling what off lease only used to be their bread and butter, two bad Carfaxes welded back together, nobody was killed in the car, all that kind of stuff, airbag deployment, but now you've got all that room in the book. If you don't have a finance department that's set up for that, then I would say, and this is where we see most of the aging come from. And at one point we looked at it, it was like 67% of the cars over 60 days old fit this category. Now, if you are the best end user, like off lease only was until there's CIT issues, then these are the cars that you can step up on. It'll give you plenty of book, but you need to have an F&I team that can do that. You need to have sets, subsets, a lead car, and a whole strategy versus just trying to, get into that space as it is. Coming around turn 4, so I'm going to close out here in a minute, but the one thing that I would say is not every dealer that I see as we're mystery shopping them will give a number for a trade. Might give a range. But in many cases, they don't give a number at all. And they said, what I run into a lot, and if you don't take anything away else from this presentation, take this away. None of us would go down to meet our realtor for lunch if we said, hey, what's my house worth? Well, hey, Brian, why don't you come on down here? We're going to figure it out, and let's sit down, and we'll talk about it. And I'm going to probably make an artificial appointment and say, sure, Michael, yeah, no problem. I'll be right there. And then I'm not going to show up. Or I'll show up and I won't have my trade because I'll have already sold it to CarMax. So that's what happens when you don't give them an exact number. And we've got the data to prove it. We'll be rolling a lot of that out at NADA. But if you don't give them if you don't answer the question that they're asking, what happens is, when we look at all the dealer Inspire websites and all the GA4 events, what happens after they don't get that answer is they bounce and they go to CarMax or they go to Carvana, or now they're going to AutoNation USA, or they're going to Lithia Driveway, or all these other people that will give them the information. So just like with Zillow, your customers are going to just get on another website if you don't give them the information. And the realtors that are thriving are the ones that have embraced this. I tried to bring Howard Horowitz up here, but he's a dealer out of Sarasota, Florida. Now, so he owns Ho Buys Cars. So I'm getting all these complaints from all these major public retailers, right? And these major public retailers are saying that there's this force down in Sarasota, and we can't, we got to change the rules, move the goalpost. These people are too competitive. They're disrupting it. They're acquiring all of our leads on selling their cars. And I'm talking 3 of the top 5, public retailers in the country. So I want to figure out what this guy's doing. So I call him up, and I forget that I signed him up like the first week I was working at cars.com. And he said, oh, because I'm so glad you connected with me. And I was just thinking Howard Horowitz. I wasn't thinking Ho-Ho, because everybody's saying, oh, Ho-Ho buys cars. And so I asked, Howard, I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, remember I called you about the service drive acquisition. And when he called me last June, I said, how many ROs you write in a month? He said, I don't know, about 5 a week. And I said, okay, 500 times 4.3, you're like at 20-something hundred ROs. He said, no, I said 5. And I go, 5 repair orders? How many technicians do you have? 1, but he only works 3 days a week. And I try to talk him out of it. I go, this product doesn't make sense for you. It's not going to work. And he said, well, I'm going to bet on myself, and I believe in myself. And I'm like, well, you can be as optimistic as you want, but 5 ROs isn't going to pay the bills. So what his niche is that he just takes his process, just like every successful used car department in here, and advertises it on the website. Contact us for a free appraisal, take a quick call. We come to you. We'll meet you within 24 hours. So he's acquiring, and it's not a whole army. It's just one dude. There's no accounting department. There's no Tim and a part-time technician. And he's acquiring 30 to 50 cars a month on average. He's made almost $1 million in the last 12 months. And everybody's trying to figure out what's the silver bullet? How are you able to acquire that many cars? And he said, well, if they're within 50 miles of here, I just hop in my car and I go to them. And that's really as complicated as it is. So as I'm looking for the silver bullet or the cup of Christ and trying to figure out what he's doing, he goes, I'm just doing what it says on my website. And I actually do it. And most others don't. And that's my competitive advantage. And I witnessed it in person because as I was at our old dealership, David, at Lexus of Clearwater. I'm working with them and I'm going through it. And I said, hey, what about this? Why don't you contact this SL450 2023 blue convertible or whatever? And they said, well, that's not really in our mix and it's not really part of our pricing strategy. And I said, well, then just take it and direct to wholesale. I don't know about that. That's a lot of risk, right? And I said, well, we're forecasting you're going to make about over $10,000. So I just dropped it and kept moving. So next thing I'm talking to Howard, and Howard goes, hey, by the way, he goes, I had this other dealer up in Clearwater, that didn't want to buy this vehicle. He goes, you'll never believe it. I went there, had my technician drop me off. I took that car straight to St. Pete Auto Auction and made $14,000 in about 5 minutes. Now that's one example. And so he's not retailing all those cars because he doesn't really have a retail team, but he's acquiring them all and outperforming everybody else in the Tampa Bay market that we work with by a long shot, just one person.
Today I had a client come in.
Sorry to say loud.
Everything was going smooth. Landed them on the right car the first time. Only problem is they didn't have the
This
trade.
is a salesperson.
So I could have made an appointment, set it up for later, and run the risk of them not coming back. Instead, asked my manager, hey, can I go to their house and appraise their vehicle? Luckily, we have Accu-Trade. Went to their house, gave them a price for the vehicle, and closed it right on the spot. Wasn't easy. They lived about 5 minutes away from the dealership. Super simple, right? Find a way to make it happen. Today I had a client come in.
So that's a salesperson at a dealership that was trying to get this customer in for a week. And kept on trying. Every manager had TO'd this thing and tried to call him instead of just enabling that guy to go 5 miles and go appraise the car, which they turned in 5 days. So I don't know how we're doing on time. We're pretty much on time, but do I have enough time to go through service drive? Okay. So talk about service drive acquisition. So the rules of the game have changed with service drive acquisition. And here's what I said for 20 years, right? So I'd walk up to customers, and I did it in every dealership I've ever worked in, and I would walk up to them, similar to this furry animal, and that's what the customer felt like, right, as they're pulling away. Hey, what if I get you out of your car into another car, keep your payment the same or less with little or no money down? Would you consider it? And the customers are like, yeah, I'm in for service. And next thing you know, the salesperson comes back over. I'm like, what happened with that guy? Well, they're just in for service, which is in like the store I used to work in, 43% of the business. So 43% of the people were just in for service, and that's where all this business is coming from. So when somebody says, even to this day, when I'm in a dealership, and they say, well, they're just in for service, that's like nails on a chalkboard to me, because those are the most loyal, best retention clients that you're gonna run into. But when they say the service drive acquisition doesn't work, it's typically because they're trying this. And that used to work when people had equity, during COVID. But it wasn't because of the psychology of that word track. It's just because the market was easy. So what we advocate is, instead of a centralized appraisal system like Dave was talking about, decentralized appraisal system. Because here's the reality of it. There's that much used car supply coming through your service drive every day. The bottom triangle is the used car demand. So there's that many consumers that want used cars because everybody's asking for more. But the pinch point in the middle is having 1, 2, or 3 appraisers to appraise all those cars. So you've got all these salespeople waiting there, and they're sitting idle when you have valets out on the service drive that are taking photos, that are checking conditions, sticking tires, checking battery tread depth, taking 11 photos for, if you have Dealer FX or something like that. We empower a $15 an hour person to do that, but we won't empower our salespeople to do the first 85% of the appraisal. So what the answer is instead of the used car managers doing all the work, they should be verifying all the work. And instead of actually taking all the pictures and being outside all day long, they can be training, leading, developing, recruiting, succession planning for their departments, when they're not doing just this all day long, which is something that somebody else can do. So now they're working on the business instead of in the business, right? So here's the math, the new math on service drive acquisition. With all the, I don't know what the quantity is, but the major groups that we're working with, right? So on an average, 3,000 customer pay and warranty repair orders, so excluding internal, 15% appraisal penetration. So if somebody has 13 or 3,000 CP and warranty repair orders, the ideal, if you have salespeople working it, right, should be 15% or 450 appraisals. Those appraisals, what we see nationwide is they close at 20%. So if you can just get them, and what's the process or how complicated is it? Instead of saying, hey, what if I get you out of your car into another car, keep your payment the same or less, which the salespeople are not bought into because they know it's not going to be like that. So they don't want to bring it up to the customer because they know it's an atomic bomb waiting to go off. We just walk up to the customer and ask them if they consider selling their vehicle, if we paid them above market value. And for the right cars, you're going to, right? And if they say no, no problem, Daniel, here's my business card. If you ever change your mind, please call me first, because we're always looking for cars like yours, because I know how you drive them. And they're always, I just factor in the tires. So that's the first thing. If they're not going to say yes, they're going to say how much. And when they say how much, then those close at 20%. So that's the math. And it's not about trying to persuade them or strong arm. There's enough business out there by just asking that question, but people have to get out of their comfort zone. You can't text your way to this. You can't chat your way. You can't just pour water on it like a chia pet and it just happens. It takes work, and people have to be airborne, not chairborne. So I'll end with this. Regardless of what technology you have, if it's vAuto, Accu-Trade, VinQ, it doesn't really matter. Van, it comes down to the people, the process, and the execution. If you don't have a scoreboard that's going to accurately measure success like this and measure each associate that's doing it, and then have a champion or some manager's pay plan that has 10 to 20% of their pay plan tied to those activities, then yeah, service drive acquisition isn't going to work. And you're going to keep going to the auction, putting your hand up, competing with CarMax. But here's the reality of CarMax and Carvana, or Lithia, or AutoNation. If you listen to their shareholder reports, what percentage of their cars are sourced from consumers? And let me rewind. CarMax and Carvana, what's the percentage that are sourced from consumers? Yeah, 80%. So I would say, how many people in this room are at 80%? And we have franchises. They're doing it straight up like an independent dealership would. So there's repeats, referrals. It's not going to happen overnight, but there's a lot of, by doing the service drive acquisition the way that we're talking about and give them a business card, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months later, we see that ripple effect with our top performing dealers to where Peter Boulware Toyota in Tallahassee is acquiring 30 cars a month just from that, the follow-up of, and not actively outbound follow-up, just the consumers calling back, hey, I don't know if you remember me, Michael, but I met you, blah, 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 when I was in for service 9 months ago. My husband was gonna go to CarMax and get an appraisal. Can you just tell me what it's worth? Right there in that moment, that's what separates dealers from CarMax, is how they handle that objection. And if you don't have, to JR and to Dave Saenz' point, if you don't have an easy, frictionless way to be able to do that quickly for the BDC, for the salespeople, and every other associate across the board to accounting, then you don't have a process.